idea. Honestly, I have no idea what the directive's going to do. Couldn't guess. So just been training and trying to get ready for this weekend. Nothing particularly special.
Can a new rule change a whole season of Formula One? While Ferrari sees a golden opportunity, Lewis Hamilton is blunt. It won't make much difference. Who is right? What was this advantage? In slow curves, ailerons generated maximum aerodynamic load by staying rigid, helping the car to have greater grip. But in lines, where what is sought is to reduce the resistance to progress and increase peak speed, the ailerons flexed back with the flow of air. This phenomenon allowed a drag reduction without using active systems such as DRS, which translated into better speed without compromising curve. The TD018 comes to limit all that. From the Spanish Grand Prix, the new FIA tests reduced the tolerance margins. The allowed vertical deflection passes from 15 mm to only 10 mm when symmetrical load is applied on both sides of the wing, and from 20 mm to 15 mm in cases of unilateral load. In addition, the spoiler fins can only flex 3 mm on their rear edge compared to the 5 mm allowed before, always under a standard point load of 60 N. These figures may seem small, but in a sport where thousandths of a second define the difference between pole and fourth place, those 2 mm less could be critical. What is eliminated here is not a visually evident advantage, but an invisible tool of aerodynamic optimization that several equipment had perfected with simulations and wind tunnels for years. It is a modification that forces everyone to redesign key pieces, modify correlations on track and adapt development strategies for the rest of the championship. But there is something more important. This directive is implemented mid-season. This means that not all teams are equally prepared to absorb the impact. Some, like Mercedes, adapted their ailerons before Emilia-Romagna's GP. Others, such as Ferrari, have chosen to bring only the new spoiler to evaluate their behavior before investing in a major redesign. And that is where the true strategic game enters. It is not just the directive itself, but how, when and with what resources each team decides to adapt. Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion and central figure in Formula One for more than a decade, has surprised with an unusually measured position regarding the implementation of the technical directive TD018. While in the paddock the statements on a possible rearrangement of the competitive order intensified, he has opted for caution. In textual words, Hamilton said, "It will definitely have an effect. It affects the balance a bit, but I do not think it is massive. It affects everyone more or less in the same way, so I cannot see that it makes a lot of difference." This statement, due to its tone and content, is completely moved away from the enthusiasm shown by others within the same Ferrari team, such as Fred Vasseur. While the team director suggests that this new standard can be a turning point in the 2025 season, Hamilton makes it clear that he does not expect a technical revolution. What you are saying between the lines is even more revealing. If everyone loses the same with this regulation, nobody really wins. Therefore, there is no strategic gain, but a neutralization of a previously extended advantage, which does not change the general balance of power between teams. The other key to his statements is what he does not say. There is no mention that Ferrari is especially well positioned to benefit from change, nor does it refer to possible weaknesses in their direct rivals. What transmits is a sense of forced equality, where everyone loses a tool, and the established order could remain practically intact. While that can be discouraging for those who expected a dramatic turn in the middle of the season, it also makes it clear that Hamilton does not get carried away by empty promises or technical speculation. On the other hand, it is also revealing that when asked if the team brought new pieces for the Spain Grand Prix, Hamilton simply replied, "Not that I know." A dry, direct phrase without ornaments. This type of response can be interpreted as a reflection of its discontent with the current level of development of the SF25, or even as a sign that internal trust within the team with respect to this directive is not as high as it is intended to show publicly. In this context, their statements are not only a technical evaluation, but also a manifestation of the pilot's mood. A world champion accustomed to competing to the front sees with frustration that his team is not in a position to capitalize on a possible regulatory opportunity. The TD018, which for some represents an occasion to reposition itself in the fight, for Hamilton seems to be a simple patch that will not alter the fundamental hierarchies that define the current season. Your position can also be related to your long-term vision. Hamilton arrived in Ferrari hoping to build a competitive project for 2026, when the technical regulation will make another important leap. The TD018, on the contrary, is an intermediate adjustment that does not change the base of the car, and therefore, probably does not awaken more enthusiasm. His attention is more focused on the future than on a technical change that, according to his judgment, will not be enough to reverse Ferrari's current situation against McLaren and Red Bull. In short, what Hamilton said is not just one more opinion. It is the perspective of someone who has seen closely how the technical changes in Formula One really work, and who knows when it is worth getting excited, and when not. Ferrari has opted for a remarkably conservative strategy before the arrival of the technical directive TD018, and that decision is generating as many questions as answers. While in Maranello there is talk of a potential change of play, the technical approach to the Spain Grand Prix has been everything but aggressive. The Italian team has introduced only a new front wing adapted to the new parameters imposed by the FIA, without accompanying it with a broader package of aerodynamic updates. The choice to limit yourself to a single piece at a time when most expected a more forceful response can be interpreted as a caution or uncertainty. Fred Vasseur, team director, explained publicly that the idea of bringing only the spoiler aims to obtain a clearer image of how the car responds to the new technical demands. This position reveals that Ferrari is not completely sure of the effect of TD018 on its general performance and prefers to analyze a single variable before compromising major resources. In terms of development, this represents a commitment to progressive analysis, which is technically prudent, but it could also be interpreted as lack of preparation or even shortage of trust in current solutions. Behind that decision there is also an economic logic. The 2025 season is in a critical phase for the development of 2026 cars, which will be subject to a completely new regulation. The equipment is operating under a strict budget limit, and Ferrari is no exception. Investing great resources in a complete redesign of the SF25 in the middle of the season would mean cutting time, money and personnel of the project of 2026, which is already emerging as a key strategic challenge. It is in this delicate balance between the immediate present and the long-term vision where Ferrari's decision is framed. It is also important to consider that the introduction of the new spoiler does not occur in ideal conditions. Adapting a piece that responds to new regulations implies altering the behavior of aerodynamic flow in the front train, which affects the general balance of the car. Without a clear correlation with the rest of the aerodynamic platform, that new spoiler could even generate unexpected behaviors, such as surviving in medium curves or loss of support in long braking. Therefore, many teams have chosen to introduce more than one component together, while Ferrari has decided to take another way. The technical directive TD018 not only modifies technical parameters, it also redraws, at least theoretically, the competitive balance between the teams. Since its announcement, this new regulation has lit debates on who benefits and who could lose performance. And although all teams are obliged to comply with the same rules, the impact will not be uniform. The central question is, what teams depended more on aerodynamic flexibility for their performance? And which ones could maintain their level without the need for these resources? Ferrari is one of the teams that could be gaining if it is confirmed that rival scudding, such as McLaren, obtained significant advantages of the strategic use of the flexion of their ailerons. Fred Vasseur has been explicit in saying that TD018 can be a change of play, precisely because it is not yet known with certainty how much its competitors depend on this technical solution. If the new directive manages to limit and undercover McLaren gain in high-speed sections where they have shown higher performance this season, Ferrari could see that gap reduced without having made great internal improvements. In this scenario, the TD018 functions as a regulatory equalizer that reduces differences without the team having to invest directly in development. McLaren, on the other hand, is in the focus of the debate. Not for what they have said, but for what they have achieved. With 6 victories in 8 major awards this season and an outstanding performance in classification and race, there are suspicions that its aerodynamic advantage was based, in part, on a highly flexible design of the front train. From the team they have insisted that the TD018 is not a headache at all, and that its technical structure was already prepared to meet the new parameters. But such statements may have a strategic component: minimize public vulnerability perception, even when they are internally preparing for deeper adjustments. Red Bull is also in a complex position. Although its domain has been trimmed in 2024 and Max Verstappen does not lead the pilot championship, the team remains a technical reference. Christian Horner has been cautious in his statements about the TD018, recognizing that the change is significant, but insisting that his engineers were prepared. However, voices such as Jos Verstappen, Max's father, have been much more direct, stating that some teams have benefited from this flexibility for too long, which suggests a criticism of McLaren and perhaps even towards previous decisions of the FIA. Mercedes is presented as the intermediate case. The German team introduced a new spoiler compatible with TD018 already in the Grand Prix of Emilia-Romagna, indicating an early preparation. From the technical direction of the team, it has been affirmed that they understand well the impact that the directive will have on his car. However, they also recognize that the most uncertain is the relative effect. Not how much they lose, but how much others lose. This statement reveals the true nucleus of the technical competition in Formula One. It is not just about how much you improve or worsen, but how that positions you with respect to the rest of the grill. In conclusion, the TD018 redefines the margins. It does not alter the rules of the game for all equally, but redistributes the letters based on how much each team benefited from the previous regulation. Ferrari could win, but only if his rivals lose more. McLaren can remain strong if his solutions did not depend so much on flexion. Red Bull, with a more traditional philosophy, can be relatively unscathed. And Mercedes, as many times in the hybrid era, seems to have done your homework. The next big prizes will say who is better prepared, and who has built its performance on a technical advantage that has now disappeared.